Today we're going to continue to look at factoring trinomials using brute force, but today I'm going to show you a shortcut. So we're going to look at our 8 steps here. Make sure you fill in your blanks on your note sheet. So step 1 is to make sure it's in standard form. Remember, standard form is just ax squared plus bx plus c. Then we're going to factor out our greatest common factor. We're going to multiply our a and c, just like we did with regular brute force, and list all our factor pairs, just like regular brute force. And then, in step 4, or step 5 rather, we want to find the factor pair that adds up to b, which remember is the middle term. Now, the steps 6 through 8, this is where it's going to change a little bit. So we're going to make 2 fractions. The numerator, remember, is the top of the fraction. The numerator of both your fractions will be your a value, and then your denominator, remember your denominator is your bottom of a fraction, will be whatever you circled from your factor pair. Then we're going to reduce or simplify if we can, and then for our final answer, the numerator, which is the top, becomes the value in front of your variable, and the denominator, remember your denominator is your bottom, becomes the constant. Okay, so this is the same chart that we used before when we talked about brute force. And remember, the way you read it is this first column tells you about multiplying. So if we multiply together to get a positive, and our middle term is positive, that means all of our factors are going to be positive. If we multiply together and we get a positive, but our middle term is negative, that means both our factors are going to be negative. If we multiply together and get a negative, and our middle term is positive, that means the bigger factor is positive, but your smaller factor is going to be negative. And with the last one, if you multiply to get a negative, and your middle term is negative, here your bigger factor is negative, but your smaller is positive. So let's look at some examples. So we're going to start the same way we did regular brute force. If we look at example 1, we have 2x squared plus 9x plus 10. And there's not a greatest common factor for 2, 9, and 10 other than 1. So we're going to multiply our a times our c. So 2 times 10 is 20. We're going to list all our factors of 20, which are 1 and 20, 2 and 10, and 4 and 5. Our middle term is positive, so that means all our factors are going to stay positive, and 4 plus 5 will give us 9. So now, instead of making a 4-term polynomial here, we're going to make 2 fractions. And the top of our fraction, our numerator, is going to be whatever our a value was, which is 2. And the bottom of our fraction, our denominator, is going to be whatever your factor pair was. So on one fraction, we're going to have a positive 4. On the other fraction, we're going to have a positive 5. Then we're going to look and say, can we reduce either one of these? So 2 over 4 we can reduce. 2 over 4 reduces to 1/2. But 2 over 5 we can't reduce. So we're going to leave this one alone. Now we're just going to write our answer in our parentheses from our fraction. So the top number is going to go with your variable, and it's going to be the first term. So this is 1x. Your bottom is going to be your constant. And since that's positive 2, we're going to say that's plus 2. In the second set of parentheses, same thing. Our top, our numerator, is going to go first, and that's going to go with our variable, which was x. The bottom is going to be your constant. That's a positive 5, so plus 5. This is your answer. Same answer as if we would have done it the longer way, but this just saves us a little bit of time. So example 2, we have 1, I'm going to make that a 1, 1x squared plus 8x plus 12. So no greatest common factor to 1, 8, and 12. So we're going to multiply 1 times 12, which is 12. So factors of 12 are 1 and 12, 2 and 6, and 3 and 4. So we need to add together to give us 8, which is 2 and 6. So now you're going to make two fractions. The numerator is going to be the a value, which is 1. The denominator is going to be your factor pair, so 2 on the bottom for one fraction, and 6 is the denominator on the other fraction. See if they'll reduce. 1 over 2 doesn't reduce, so we'll leave it. 1 over 6 doesn't reduce, so we'll leave it. Then you're just going to fill in your parentheses. So your numerator goes with your variable, which was x here, so 1x. Your denominator is whatever you're adding, so positive 2, so plus 2. Same thing for the second set. The numerator goes with your variable, so 1x. The denominator is your constant, so plus 6. And there's your answer. Example 3, 3x squared minus 16x plus 5. So no greatest common factor to 3, 16, and 5. So multiply a times c, so 3 times 5, which is 15. So factors of 15 are 1 and 15, and 3 and 5. Notice our middle term's negative though. Negative in the middle, positive when we add. So that means all our factors are negative. So negative 1 plus negative 15 will give us negative 16. Two fractions. The a value is your numerator, which is 3. Your factor pair is your denominator, negative 1 and negative 15. We're going to see if we can reduce. Now 3 divided by negative 1 would give us negative 3, but we want it to stay a fraction, so we're going to leave that one alone. 3 over negative 15 though, we can reduce this. 3 divided by 3 is 1. 15 divided by 3 rather is 5, and I'm going to carry over that negative. So we're going to look at this fraction instead. Then we're going to make our two sets of parentheses. The numerator goes with your variable, and it's the first term, so 3x. Your denominator is your constant. Since that's negative 1 this time, we're going to say minus 1. Same thing for the second set. You're using the reduced one. So 1x. Your denominator is a negative, so minus 5. And there's our final answer. Example 4, we have 1x squared, and we'll make that a 1, minus 1x minus 6. So no greatest common factor to 1, 1, and 6 other than 1. So multiply a times c. 1 times negative 6 is negative 6. So factors of 6 are 1 and 6, and 2 and 3. So if we look at our chart, we're multiplying together to give us a negative, and adding together. The middle term is a negative. So that means our bigger term is negative. So 2 plus negative 3 will give us negative 1. So now we're going to make our fractions. The numerator is the a value, which is 1. The denominator is your factor pair. So 2 for the first fraction, negative 3 for the second fraction. 1 over 2 does not reduce. 1 over negative 3 does not reduce. So then we'll just fill in our parentheses. Top number goes with your variable, so 1x. Denominator is your constant, plus 2. Numerator goes with your variable, 1x. Denominator is your constant. Since it's negative 3, it's minus 3. There's your final answer. Example 5, we have 2x squared plus 6x plus 4. Now this one does have a greatest common factor. 2 will go into 2, 6, and 4. So we're going to have to factor a 2 out of this one first. So 2 divided by 2, we'll leave this as 1. Bring down your x squared. 6 divided by 2, make that positive 3. Bring down your variable x. 4 divided by 2 would be positive 2. Now we're going to do brute force to the part that's inside the parentheses. So we're going to say 1 times 2, which is 2. The only factors of 2 are 1 and 2, and 1 plus 2 will give us our middle term here, which is 3. So when we make our fractions this time, our a value is what's inside the parentheses, which is 1. So that's our numerator. Our denominator is our factor pair over here. So positive 1, positive 2. On the first one, 1 divided by 1 will give us 1, but we want to leave it a fraction. So we're going to leave that one alone. The second one, 1 divided by 2, 1/2. That doesn't reduce either. So now we'll fill in our parentheses to get our final answer here. So first set of parentheses, the numerator goes with the variable, so 1x. The denominator is your constant, so plus 1. Same thing on the second one. The numerator goes with your variable, so 1x. Denominator is your constant, plus 2. Remember, this one also had a greatest common factor, which was 2, so we'll carry that down in front as well. And this is your final answer. Last example, we have 4x squared plus 22x plus 10. This one has a greatest common factor as well, so we're going to start there. So 2 will go into 4, 22, and 10. So we're going to factor a 2 out in the very beginning. So we'll divide that 2 out of each term. So 4 divided by 2 is 2. Bring down that x squared. The middle term, 22 divided by 2 is positive 11. Bring down that variable x. And then the last term, 10 divided by 2, is positive 5. So now we're going to do brute force to the center here, to the part that's in the parentheses. So our a times c is going to be 2 times 5, which is 10. So factors of 10 are 1 and 10, and 2 and 5. Our middle term is positive 11, so they're all positive. So 1 plus 10 will give us 11. Two fractions. The numerator is going to be our a value, which is this 2. So positive 2. The denominator is going to be your factor pair. So one of them will be positive 1. The other will be positive 10. Then we're going to see if we can reduce. So 2 over 1. We're going to leave that one alone. It could reduce to 2, but we want to keep it a fraction, so we'll leave that one. 2 over 10, though, 2 will go into both of those. So 2 divided by 2 makes your numerator 1. 10 divided by 2 makes your denominator 5. So now, when we go to fill in our set of parentheses to write our final answer, we're going to have our numerators 2. So 2 with our variable x. Our denominator is 1, so plus 1. Second set, our numerator is 1, so 1x. Our denominator is 5, so plus 5. Greatest common factor again, so that carries down in front. That's our final answer.